Montgomery County schools are in better shape than most of the state's school systems. That's because the Board of Education has $5 million in a capital outlay fund. Originally meant for new building projects, that money will now go to pay regular operating costs. But Finance Officer Joe Piazza says if cutbacks in state funds continue, Montgomery may have to borrow money next year. Less fortunate counties have already borrowed to meet payrolls. Some, like Barber County, have almost reached the limit of how much money they can borrow.
So they find themselves that they're facing borrowing with no promise to pay back for several months. And they're going to have to deal with the reality of whether or not we can continue to operate. And in my judgment, there are going to be some school districts who cannot justify operating after the first 2 or 3 months of school.
Then what do they do?
I think we may see some close unless there's some promise of relief.
Some superintendents are talking about a 4-day school week to reduce operating costs. Others, like Geneva County Superintendent Ernest Smith, fear they may have to close schools by Christmas. Almost everyone we talked to said they're looking to the legislature to alleviate the school funding crisis. Even after local schools start receiving full state funding again, Baker says proration will have its effects. He says it will be years before counties can pay off their loans and even longer before they can replace old school buses and complete neglected building repairs. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Manpower survey forecasts only 7% of the Montgomery employers polled project more hirings over the next 3 months. That's a decrease from the previous quarter when 27% projected additional hirings. 23% of those companies polled say they are planning reductions in hirings. That's a 10% increase over the previous 3 months. 70% of the employers polled predict no change in Montgomery's temporary employment patterns. The survey says cutbacks are expected by transportation companies, public utilities, education institutions, and public agencies using temporary personnel. The outlook for retail merchants is mixed. Manpower survey shows employers in the Northeast, West, and Southern regions of the country predicting slight improvements in hiring expectations. 26% of the employers in the South polled by Manpower say they plan additions to their staff. It's anticipated 8% of those polled plan reductions in employment, while 63% foresee no change. Manpower's survey is based on past experiences reported to them by the same companies and affects temporary health service only. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
Thompson was given a warm welcome by Acting Committee Chairman Metzenbaum of Ohio and Senator Howell Heflin of Alabama, Thompson's chief sponsor. However, there was a sense of urgency to today's proceedings. President Carter's last nominee for this job, Fred Gray, was unable to win Senate approval when it was disclosed that he may have been guilty of conflict of interest in some of his past cases. But Thompson, it is felt, has no such ghosts in his closet, and to underscore that point, he was given a glowing recommendation by Senator Heflin.
He has taught at 2 different institutions of higher learnings. He has a record of excellence in academic achievement at one of the nation's finest universities. He is the first black assistant attorney general in the state of Alabama and our state's first black bar examiner. His industriousness is evidenced by a string of jobs that he has held in high school, college, and law school. He is a young man of rare maturity, diverse interest, and keen judicial temperament.
Heflin also reminded the committee of the importance he attaches to elevating minorities to the federal bench. Senator Metzenbaum responded by saying that he was indeed impressed with Thompson's background, but did question whether the nominee at age 33 is experienced enough to take on a job like federal judge. It was left to Thompson himself to answer that one.
The state of Alabama, of course, has a tradition of appointing young judges who've turned out to be very fine judges. I believe that, if anything, my age should work for me. In fact, one of our great Supreme Court justices, Justice Joseph Story, was 32 when he went on the United States Supreme Court. So I'm far from being the youngest man appointed to a judicial office.
You would be available if the president should decide to put you there?
Actually, Thompson does have one other factor working against him, which is perhaps even more important than the experience issue, and that factor is time. With the Senate scheduled to be in session for only 2 more weeks, it's very possible that there will be no vote at all on Thompson's nomination this year. Right now, Senator Heflin puts his chances at no better than 50-50. Bruce Finland, WSFA TV News, Washington.
It's that guy going up the pile driver. It's that guy going up the pile driver.
Airport officials are completely surprised over Ocean Airways' sudden decision to cancel its passenger flight service, especially since flights out of Montgomery have been 80 to 100% full. That information from Ocean Airways spokesman Richard Hurd.
Hurd says the decision came following a weekend board of directors meeting at company headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut. Ocean's initial service has 2 daily flights from Montgomery to Atlanta, but as of late yesterday, those flights have been canceled. Along with flights to and from Atlanta and Montgomery, Ocean also served St. Simons Island, Georgia. A company spokesman says a disagreement between the airline and officials with Atlanta's new Hartsfield International Airport caused the company to discontinue its southern region flight service. Sources say the disagreement is over terminal and gate space in the new airport that began operation on Sunday. Company officials say the small amount of space provided by the Atlanta terminal is just too costly. Airport officials say they aren't worried about Ocean leaving because they say a recent decision by Delta Airlines to phase out a DC-9 and replace it with a Boeing 727 will make up the difference in passenger flights. Airport Director Ken Mew says Pinehurst, a South Carolina-based airline, is considering locating in Montgomery, but no definite decision has been made as of yet.
While passengers may be upset over flight cancellations, employees here at Ocean Airways have a lot more to worry about because their jobs have been canceled as well. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
It's been a fairly long 4 hours since the polls closed, long for the Stewart supporters anyway. The race between Stewart and Folsom was expected to be a close race, but this one was closer than most had really wanted it to be. Groups of solemn-faced Stewart supporters were evidence that the small lead Folsom enjoyed early in the evening was closer than Stewart might have wanted. Early the votes were rural and from the southern half of the state, Folsom votes. But the numbers these people were concerned with were from the industrial northern half of the state, a Stewart stronghold. But even so, the race was close, but no surprise.
No, it's not a surprise at all. We've been planning, the Senator Stewart and his entire staff have been planning on a tough fight. We've waged a tough fight. We've felt that all along it was going to be a tough battle.
One defense that Stewart supporters are already presenting is that Republicans showed up to vote in this Democratic primary runoff, voting for Jim Folsom Jr. under the contention that it might be easier for Jeremiah Denton to beat Folsom in November rather than Stewart. Another reason that this campaign could be a close race is that the lingering effects of the investigations into Senator Donald Stewart's campaign finances of 1978 are still being remembered by the voters who went to the polls today. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Stewart campaign headquarters.
Well, no, I mean, we worked hard. We worked awfully hard, and our people did. And I wouldn't say anything about anything anybody did in connection with the campaign. If anybody has to take the responsibility for where we are right now, it'd have to be me.
Well, I wouldn't be going out on a limb too far to say that there are more Democrats in the state of Alabama than there are Republicans. But, of course, any election is very serious. Any formidable candidate, such as the Admiral, is a formidable candidate, makes it a serious election.
I've seen tremendous quickness on defense. Their defense is salty. Jimmy Noonan's an All-American player at nose guard, and if we don't block him, we'll have trouble getting back to the line of scrimmage. And they have great quickness in their linebackers and secondary, and that concerns us quite a bit. On the other hand, on offense, their wide receivers are blazing fast. A couple of them are Olympic sprinters, Hancock and Willie Galt. And then they have another youngster, Miller, that caught a touchdown pass against Georgia. We'll have to neutralize that if we hope to win the football game.
I saw this morning where Reggie Harper is going to be back just in time for Auburn. I'm sure that doesn't please you too much.
No, they all seem to get ready about the time we play them. Yeah. That's hard to understand sometimes. But Harper played some last week, and he's ready this week.
The issue was whether to reprogram $100,000 of community development funds to build ramps for the handicapped at Riverfront Park. The project has been mandated by the federal government, and Mayor Emery Falmer says community development funds would be threatened if the city doesn't build the ramps. The money was to come from surpluses from projects that have been completed in several districts, but Councilman Joe Reed, Mark Gilmore, Luther Oliver, and Donald Watkins opposed using the funds for the park.
This is not surplus money. This is really money that's needed in the respective districts.
This is a project for the handicapped, yet everybody proclaims their love for the handicapped, but they don't want anything, any money to be spent except monies that would be coming from another source.
The problem is that we have two disadvantaged groups, both of which need money. The groups represented by those projects that have some surplus funds left over in the handicap group.
Watkins said he considered it a trespass to take money away from his district and vowed he would sue every council member who voted for the proposal. John Starr pointed out that the money doesn't belong to any one district, that it must revert back to a contingency fund when there's a surplus after a project is completed. The reprogramming passed by a vote of 5-4. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
The committee is seeking information on nuclear waste sites and how the safety of Alabama's citizens will be affected. 3 waste sites are already operating in other states, but more are needed.
It has been suggested by various groups at least 3 more sites, a minimum of 3 sites.
Would there be any in the state of Alabama?
Personally, I don't think that would ever happen.
Oakley told committee members there is the possibility that waste dumps will be restricted to materials produced within the states where the sites are located.
Perhaps the biggest question to be answered by the results of these hearings will be, what will Alabama do with its nuclear waste when other states close their borders to it? This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
The heat wave that caused you so much discomfort in July and August is still taking its toll on your grocery bill. Leading the list of food price increases is produce. Produce prices are quickest to respond to the weather. Fruits and vegetables went up a whopping 10.8% this month. Poultry, also responsive to conditions, increased almost 6%, followed by price hikes for pork, beef, and dairy products. Meat prices are up because hogs and cattle didn't gain weight due to heat stress, and those prices aren't expected to come down in the near future. One product whose price did decrease was eggs. A Farm Bureau spokesman speculates that hens have started laying again after the worst of the dry spell. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Pensions and Security Commissioner Gary Cooper told his workers they wouldn't receive a pay raise because the money needed is not available. McDonald says the pay raise is not an option by department heads or the state finance department because it's mandated by the legislature.
The only condition where any employee will not receive the pay raise would be if the general fund were put into proration, perhaps. But they will receive the pay raise.
McDonald says department heads determine the number of employees he hires to fit a budget, but not what they can be paid.
But any department that anticipates a manpower level and being able to fund that manpower level out of a conditional appropriation is not on sound ground. Conditional appropriation means just what it says. Maybe the money will be available and maybe it will not. And nobody should go about spending it or committing to spend it until some allocation of the conditional appropriation is made by this office with the concurrence of the governor.
Commissioner Cooper is expected to notify P&S employees tomorrow that their anticipated pay raise is forthcoming. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
More informal transcript, and that would be the attachment to Professor Booker's letter, the required statements we must file indication thereof. They're so marked Exhibit 2 through 5. I have with me this morning Mr. Elliott, Mr. Thornburg, my immediate left, Mr. Huffman, 6.408 mils, which runs the factor up this month. 1,000 megawatt hours of hydro generation. And what was it last week? The cost of the company is about 50%.
Well, we'll make them schedule now. I mean, since we don't have one, all of them.
Lucille Knox and Louise Turner are close friends who share a lot. On a Sunday afternoon last month, they shared a very strange experience.
I happened to look out, and when I did, I saw this streak of lightning come down, like straight down, and it zigzagged. And just by the time it got to the top of her house, looked like it made a loud explosion. I heard this noise, just like Louise, you know, and I was sitting on the bed, and I looked around, I saw this little light coming down the hall, and I thought, well, my, what is that? I says, is somebody coming in my house with a flashlight? And I saw it, I started to get up and see about it, and I saw it was coming on down, you know, gradually coming on down. About that time, I leaned over like this and saw this big old ball, and it got even with the door, and it stopped. And it went to bobbing up and down like that. And
did it ever touch the floor?
I never touched a thing. Never, it didn't touch a thing in the world in my house. And turned and come just as straight towards me at that bed as anything you've ever seen. Well, I jumped up about that time and I says, oh my God. And I stood there and looked at it, and it went across my bed about 6 inches above my bed, out the window.
Where the ball of light went and what it apparently was in Part 2 on Thursday. I'm Dan Atkinson with Weather Beat.
Political pollster Ray Evans says the Folsom name and his father, former Governor Big Jim, were the main reasons for the defeat of Donald Stewart.
Folsom is a new face. The people of Alabama continue to look for that new face. They want somebody they can believe in. Honesty of public officials is one thing they seek, and they see this in Folsom as they do in Jeremiah Denton.
Okay, now, are there other things or factors that attract voters to Jim Folsom Jr.?
Well, of course, Folsom's father attracts a lot of votes for him from people in the 50 and older group. Folsom himself, throughout his two races for public office, has been able to put together some people that have stuck with him and believe in him. And like any other political leader, he has followers, probably a lot more than we all realize.
A significant number of black voters came out for Jim Folsom. The ADC supported Stewart, but so far no one has been able to explain why so many blacks voted for Jim Folsom Jr. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
Just as the primary election had been close between Folsom and Stewart, so was last night's runoff. Folsom trailed Stewart initially, but then moved ahead and maintained a slim but steady lead. At his Birmingham campaign headquarters late last night, Stewart looked back on the way the campaign evolved.
We worked hard. We worked awfully hard, and our people did. And I wouldn't say anything about anything anybody did in connection with the campaign. If anybody has to take the responsibility for where we are right now, it'd have to be me.
While Stewart awaited favorable late returns from North Alabama, Folsom and about 200 campaign supporters and friends looked ahead to November.
Any election is very serious. Any formidable candidate, such as the Admiral, is a formidable candidate, makes it a serious election. And so we are going into this with a firm sense of commitment on winning in November.
Folsom narrowly prevented Stewart from winning outright in the September 2nd primary by capturing 36% of the vote. But last night, Folsom carried 44 of the state's 67 counties, including many rural districts where he trailed Stewart 3 weeks ago. 31-year-old Folsom, who could be one of the youngest U.S. senators in U.S. history, faces Republican Jeremiah Denton in the November 4th general election. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
Dot Moore says the dispute over allowing Republicans to vote in a Democratic runoff caused some confusion among election officials as well as voters. She says at Perry Hill Fire Station, one man declared he was a Republican and wanted to vote, but election officials turned him away. At other precincts, observers report several would-be voters turned away after seeing signs that read, "This is a Democratic primary runoff." But the county Democratic chairwoman says she thinks any crossover voting in the county is negligible.
The precincts, by the great majority that Folsom carried on September the 2nd, are the same precincts that Folsom carried on September 23rd.
Mrs. Moore says 2,000 more people voted in yesterday's Senate race than in the Democratic Senate race 3 weeks ago. But she says both candidates gained votes, and only 3 precincts that went for Stewart earlier turned to Folsom in the runoff. Only 4 polling places reported challenge votes. They'll be turned over to District Attorney Jimmy Evans. If any of those votes is challenged because the official thought the voter was a Republican, Evans will have to decide what to do about crossover voting. But if the challenged votes are only among the occasional foul-ups that can accompany elections, the issue of crossover voting probably won't be decided in Montgomery this time around. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Joseph Farley, president of Alabama Power, says the utility's Farley nuclear plant near Dothan has elaborate communications procedures with civil defense people should an accident occur. Appearing before an interim legislative committee on nuclear energy, he says safety is paramount in the operation of the company's nuclear power plants.
We feel that nuclear energy is safe. Now, we recognize that anything devised by man is not totally free from some risk.
Farley says Alabama Power disposes of low-level nuclear waste by transporting it to a federal facility in South Carolina for storage. He says it may be necessary to maintain some disposal sites at plant locations. Officials of TVA say they have the kind of safety-first nuclear program that makes a major accident extremely unlikely. State Civil Defense Director Sam Sloan says Alabama is adequately prepared for emergencies at plants. A number of local civil defense directors call for closer coordination between state and local officials in emergency planning. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
That's another is just to get a chance to get to those boys and have those parents assist us. But we can't do it by ourselves. Those few of us who are.
Inside this vial are vital medical facts, which makes life-saving information handy to emergency workers. The little plastic cylinder holds a medical data form listing health problems, doctors' names, and medications. They are provided free by the Association of Retired Persons. Fire medics suggest placing the vial inside the upper right-hand portion of the refrigerator. The decal placed on the outside of the refrigerator lets rescue workers know the person's basic medical story is inside. Spokesperson Elizabeth Carter says more than 100 of the containers were distributed yesterday. She says they are available to everyone, but especially to elderly persons and those with serious medical problems. And she says fire medics like the program because it makes their job, saving a person's life, a lot easier. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Tell them to keep playing. Tell them don't stop.
Thank you very much, Bob. A lot of excited Folsom supporters down here tonight. What do you think about all this?
Well, Dan, it's hard for anyone to express any words at this time. Appreciation to the people of Alabama and the many workers and volunteers who work so hard to put this together. It's a very humbling experience, and I appreciate the vote, and I want to tell all of the viewers and all of the voters who supported me how much me and my wife here appreciate the vote that was given to us. And I would also like to say to all of those the Democrats who weren't with us this time, I ask my heartfelt, from my heart I ask them to join up, close ranks with us for our fight in November.
You said some weeks ago that you had the nomination in the bag, and then 3 weeks ago here in this very room you said that you had some things you needed to do within the next 3 weeks, working up to today. So you had some people you had to reach in some of the metropolitan areas. Do you think that made a difference?
Definitely, I think it did. We did very well in many of the metropolitan areas that we didn't do so well in last time. That was Mobile. We did much better there. We split the vote there, and we carried Huntsville, and we did very well in Tuscaloosa and most of the metropolitan cities that we lost. So we feel that we did a lot to come back in those areas, and I attribute it all to the people that work for me. I owe 99% of this success tonight to them.
Do you think you received some crossover votes during today's election?
I don't know, Dan. They've been asking me that now for a week or two, and I have not wanted to comment on that very much. I guess it's possible. I think that's been going on for 150 years in the state of Alabama, but I really couldn't answer the question.
Okay, what's ahead now, between now and November?
Well, of course, I think we're going to take maybe 1 day off, 2 days off, rest a little bit. It's been really a sprint, a 6-week sprint. We've worked very hard, and we have continued to move forward. And then, of course, we'll get everybody back together again and continue to campaign over the next 6 weeks right up until the November general election. And we'll just keep working.
Mrs. Folsom, I'm sure you're excited about all of this tonight. What are your feelings?
Dan, it's really hard to express my feelings. I'm really full of emotion right now, and very much of it is gratitude to our supporters and our helpers all across the state. We have relied on volunteers, and the volunteers have really backed us. They've really worked hard, and we love every one of them. And I'd love to be able to hug each and every one of them across the state right now.
Okay, looking forward to November now. What do you think you'll have to do to defeat Jeremiah Denton?
Well, we're just going to continue with the campaign we've been running thus far, addressing issues, addressing and talking to the folks, the people of Alabama, and hopefully continuing along that basis.
I understand that there hasn't been a Republican senator in the U.S. Senate since 1860. Do you think that'll be an advantage in the election between here and November?
Well, I wouldn't be going out on a limb too far to say that there are more Democrats in the state of Alabama than there are Republicans. But of course, any election is very serious. Any formidable candidate, such as the Admiral, is a formidable candidate, makes it a serious election. And so we are going into this with a firm sense of commitment on on winning in November.
Have you received any calls tonight, any congratulatory calls?
Well, it's been so hectic around here. I haven't been on the phone that much, but I think that I hear Senator Heflin has called, and I appreciate that deeply. I appreciate his call very much. I haven't talked with him, but I hear he did call headquarters down here tonight.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
That's the way it looks here from Folsom headquarters, Bob. Reporting live, I'm Dan Black for WSFA TV News.
Well, I thought they did well, and I've seen the film too, and that place played a good game. As a matter of fact, second half, I thought they had a chance to win there. They like to play football, and they're young and aggressive and roll the sleeves up and come at you.
Van Heflin's a senior quarterback. Is that the best thing that Vandy's got going for him?
Well, no, I think the kicking game is the best thing they have going for them, and the aggressiveness of the fact that they seem like they like to play football, and he just puts them out there and lets them play, and they come after you. And I don't think they have their youth is going to be in their favor one of these days too, because I don't think they have but two seniors. And they play football, it's fun playing football, and they seem to like to compete. And that's a difficult kind of team to beat.
Day one of the $70,000 Bass Masters Classic, the 10th of these matchups of the best bass fishermen in the world. And right now, the leader is Bo Dowden of Natchitoches, Louisiana. Dowden, a perennial high finisher, but as yet a non-winner, caught many bass today, culling as he went. His 5 limit weighed 20 pounds and 15 ounces. He had 2 in excess of 5 pounds. Dowden has a 4-pound lead on Hank Parker and Basil Bacon, last year's winner and #2 finisher. And with Larry Nixon, Bass Angler of the Year, and Roland Martin very much within striking distance, it's still anybody's Bass Classic. 4 years ago, they didn't even know bass grew in these far northern waters. Now they know, but no one feels confident that the good fishing will hold through the next 2 days of this tournament. This is Phil Snow reporting from Alexandria Bay, New York, along the St. Lawrence River.
Those in attendance were there to voice their support for a Reagan-Bush ticket, the re-election of Congressman Bill Dickinson, and the election of Rear Admiral Jeremiah Denton. Before the speeches were made, both Dickinson and Denton took time out to do a little campaigning and to say hello to old friends. During his remarks to the group, Dickinson said the country is in serious condition. He says many of the problems can be linked to President Carter. He says the president has made several promises which he hasn't kept, like balancing the budget, reducing inflation, and creating a strong national defense. In his speech, Rear Admiral Denton agreed with Dickinson's remarks, saying it's not enough just to elect Ronald Reagan as president. He says to make a difference, the Republicans must also elect Republican congressmen. Speaking briefly on the moral majority, which supported him in the primary, Denton says he doesn't believe the group is as large as the news media said it is, but thinks it does have a voice in government.
Now, I do believe that there is a moral majority with small letters, small m moral, small m majority, not the one that gets a lot of press and does a lot of talking, and I'm not in disagreement with the thrust of what they're trying to do. But there is a moral majority in this country.
Denton says his election will be an uphill battle since most Alabamians are Democrats, but he asked those present to work hard campaigning for all Republican candidates by converting some traditional Democrats. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News. The two appointees are Mrs. Maggie Walker and Clinton Carter. Mrs. Walker, a 25-year veteran with the Montgomery school system, will be the second black assistant superintendent in the county. Beginning October 1st, she'll be in charge of special services. On January 1st, Carter will take over as assistant superintendent for administration, personnel, and purchasing. He's worked in the Montgomery school system for 24 years and is currently the principal at Lee High School. Before the appointments were made, board member Henry Spears asked that they be deferred for 1 month to give him an opportunity to gather and present what he called data on the positions that could change the board members' minds. Several board members asked Spears to be more specific. He said he couldn't at this time, but did say the information had nothing to do with the individual's character. Later, all the members except Spears voted for the appointments. In other business, Finance Director Joe Piazza presented a $44 million budget for 1980-81. He says the budget is based on the assumption that the state will provide all funds allocated to the schools and does not include projected proration figures. He says the budget shows a 19% increase over last year, which he attributes to increases in salaries, transportation, and utilities. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
And I do have some credibility already up in that Senate. I think young Jim will be starting kind of fresh and maybe a little bit behind the power curve in being able to get started right away up there. I believe I'll be able to be more than one vote in that Senate. I think I'll be able to influence the vote of the others. I've just come back from Washington, and I was encouraged by their receptivity to the prospect of my joining them.
Use the term young Jim. Will that be?
I did read in the paper this morning that he'll be one of the youngest senators, if he's elected, ever to go to the United States Senate, and perhaps the youngest from the state of Alabama. So I believe in terms of qualifications for service, that is a factor.
Board member Ron Creel objected to Dr. Teague's recommendation, saying the bottom line question is who has jurisdiction over junior colleges. He says until the courts decide, the board would not be resolving the key issue. Board members defeated Creel's motion to table the recommendation, along with board member Christine Drake's motion to delay action for 30 days. She agreed with Creel. But Chairman Harold Martin says the request is based on whether the commission will grant temporary approval, which will not interfere with the operation of the school until the courts can decide who has authority over junior colleges. The board did agree, however, on the appointment of Dr. James Owen as the new president at Chattahoochee Valley Community College in Phoenix City. Dr. Owen replaces Ralph Savage, who resigned last month after the board found him guilty of misuse of school funds. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Bo Dowden is a slow-talking, slow-walking, hard-fishing Louisianian. He's poised to win this $30,000 top prize in the Bassmasters Classic World Series of Bass Fishing. Dowden, whose 5-fish limit totaled 20 pounds, 15 ounces yesterday, went right back to that glory hole today and quickly caught his limit again. He spent the rest of the day culling, but he was able to get only one 5-pounder today. He had 2 yesterday. The take for the day, day 2, 17 pounds, 9 ounces. That is a 4-pound lead on the number 2 man. The number 2 man is Basil Bacon of Springfield, Missouri. He went out and caught 18 pounds of bass today, so it's a 2-man race on tomorrow's final day. Each is fishing a different area. Dowden is convinced he can catch his limit tomorrow, and if he does, he will be very hard to overtake. It was cool and damp on the St. Lawrence Seaway waters today, with windy, cold, and rainy weather forecast for tomorrow. Bo wouldn't mind a blizzard. Phil Snow reporting from Alexandria Bay, New York, site of the 10th annual Bassmasters Classic.
We look at this audit to have long-term effects on customer bills in the future. This is nothing that is going to show up next month or the month after. However, we will ask that the accounting firm submit its recommendations for the audit of the fuel adjustment clause, as well as to tell us alternatives that we might institute that would be more effective and provide for more efficient incentives to the Alabama Power Company and the fuel adjustment clause. So at this time, I would move that we accept the bid of Touche Rawson Company for the auditing of the Alabama Power Company Fuel Adjustment Clause.
I second the motion.
Mr. Sampson?
Yes.
Mr. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Folsom?
Yes.
Subject to commission approval means dispose of this will be to have a couple of our people.
You know what I'm saying? Okay, come on, let's play this. You got 69, you've got 55, and sir, you've got this. Well, 300 is the magic number we're going for. And am I standing in a hole? What? Oh. 300 is the magic number we're going for. 100 people surveyed. Top 6 answers are on the board. Here's the question. Name something you could do to ensure that you would have a quiet evening at home.
Get rid of the kids.
Dump the kitty. Down in 4 answers better than that, sir.
Turn off the television.
Turn off the TV. Not only wrong, it shows you have a cruel streak. Now, are you going to play or pass?